everyone. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Megan.
And welcome to a new and improved Grave Breaches.
We're new and improved already?
New and improved, less us, but also...
Fair enough.
There's been a change. It's no longer girls don't... how do you say it? Do you go to all girls college or boys and girls together college? It's a
Forrest Gump.
It's a
podcast.
Girls and boys together podcast.
Okay. Is that
Yeah,
because
I'm
a girl and you're a boy?
If you don't, I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that
if you don't get that reference, you're probably not listening. So
yes.
Okay, that was a painful start. Let's
sure
get into it.
What are we doing?
This week's episode is Incident on King Street, or as you, an American, may know it as, the Boston Massacre.
You're assuming all of our listeners are American. They might not be. Possibly.
I thought we made this American only. Like, you can't download it outside of America.
I don't think so.
That's not how the Wi-Fi works.
I'm still figuring it out, though.
Well, I'm going to have to www it later.
Okay.
Yeah, the incident on King Street, we call it the Boston Massacre, first of the episode. Jot it down. But it's actually not even capitalized. Like, when it's talked about over there, it's just like, it's not a proper...
That's
subject.
not what they call it. That's only what we call it in the U.S.
But I'm saying incident on King Street. It's not even like the incident on King Street.
It's just like this little thing that happened.
The I is lower. What I'm saying is the I is lowercase. It's
yeah, I know. I get what you're saying.
Like a incident, not the incident.
It's not like we portray it in the U.S.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, if you haven't figured it out yet, today's episode takes us back a bit further than our first episode, but also I feel like it's going to really kind of set the parameters or the lateral limits, if you will, of what we're covering.
Yes.
Because this one happened 252 years ago.
We're very versatile here.
That's
not
what I like
putting
to call
ourselves
it.
in a box.
That's what I like to call it. Yeah, breaking
blocks.
Boxes too.
That works.
Blocks and breaking boxes.
We're breaking blocks and boxes over here at Grave Breaches.
And going to a co-ed school.
There you go.
Wow. Okay, so this episode we really can't talk about the war crime without talking about the history of what's happening during this time. It's kind of an important factor.
Of course.
So, looking back just a few years, February 2nd, I'm going to work on it, I promise. February 1763. The 7 years, this is really where you can start to see the kind of the foundation of where we end up desiring to break away, start to really
and be our
come
own
into place.
country.
Yeah. So
okay.
1763, the 7 Years' War, we know it as the French and Indian War, it ends.
Yes.
The kicker there is, obviously that's not like, why would that be a bad thing? Well, what happened was it placed a huge debt on the British Empire. Like, they spent a lot of money and resources to make this thing happen.
Mm-hmm.
Their heavier taxes end up being placed on the colonies.
Mm-hmm.
It's where the war was fought, in their mindset, like, hey,
that's fair.
Yeah, we did all this kind of for y'all, like, we're going to make y'all pay for it.
That's what they're saying. That's not what I'm saying. But yes, following.
Yes. Also, having sent so many troops to fight in this war, there was definitely an increase during the time of the war, but even after you saw it, influx in military presence and British military presence. So there's a lot more of them there from the, obviously during the war, but even after, just kind of, I guess they're already there. It's going to take a lot of money to get them back. Like, we're not just talking about flying them back to England. Like, it takes a lot to move somebody from one of these colonies to the other. Like,
that's true.
Was it like a 6-month voyage? Like, it
Yeah.
took a little bit of resources.
They might not have wanted to do that again. Can you imagine?
Well, something
Once they get established.
what I found really neat, I didn't know this. They got paid so little.
Yeah.
Well, obviously the enlisted guys, but they got paid so little that a lot of them ended up finding like part-time jobs
in the colonies.
Wow. And
I
then so there's a whole nother like set of people who were upset about these soldiers being here because they took our jobs.
Oh,
and,
wow.
I mean, they really kind of did.
I mean, to be fair.
There's obviously things you gain from employing a British soldier in a British colony over just some scrub off the street. So they really were kind of taking jobs away from people.
The colonists.
Yeah, it's so crazy to research this stuff. There's a whole lot more that we just weren't taught about. But anyway, so that happens in 1765. 1767, the Townsend duties.
That sounds familiar to me. Like I've heard about that before.
So that's not just one thing. It's kind of
history.
a whole bunch of things. Just basically a whole bunch of new taxes that nobody wants, right? I'm not going to spend too much time on the history lessons here, but obviously Townsend duties, you can Google that and you'll find all kinds of information. October 1768, British troops occupy Boston to enforce all these new taxes.
Okay, so there's even more occupying, or...
Yeah, well, they Boston is now under our control.
Okay.
We're running Boston.
Okay.
December 1773 is, as you know, the Boston Tea Party.
Yeah.
Which, was more kind of just a big finger to the crown. Of course, they did waste some money, but I think back in those days, obviously pride was worn on the shoulders of people, and the king was no exception. King George III was no exception.
Getting Hamilton pictures. Same king, right? That's
yes.
The time period.
And he sang like that too.
Did he?
Yeah.
Yes. I love King George.
So, we kind of, when we talk about the American Revolution, it's kind of like, oh, we were upset and we went to war. But you look back on this, and this is very, very vague and very, very brief, but 1763, you're kind of already starting to be moving towards something that happens over a decade later.
Yeah.
Of course, in June 1774, the coercive acts are also what we call the intolerable acts. There's 5 of them. Really, it's a rebuttal to the Boston Tea Party. They closed the port of Boston. They required British troops to be housed in taverns/vacant buildings. Now, I'm going to get more into that.
Okay.
The act did require colonial governments to provide and pay for feeding and sheltering any troops stationed in their colony. If enough barracks were not made available, then soldiers could be housed in inns, stables, outbuildings, uninhabited houses, or private homes that sold wine or alcohol. So there are formal, this wasn't just a bunch of drunken British soldiers who are like, I'd rather sleep in a house than my tent, and they just kick in somebody's door and force them out.
Yeah.
There was Parliament passed official documents, and it was very formal, and it was not as intrusive as, we may have been taught growing up. Now, I don't want to say that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there's people who, commanders or whoever, who make their own decisions and say,
kind of did what they wanted.
We couldn't find an inn in this town, but there's a house.
Yeah, but this is the nicest house.
Yeah.
We're gonna live here, yeah.
But it certainly wasn't British or England saying, hey, this is going to happen, suck it up.
Yeah.
That wasn't their aim.
It wasn't quite the quartering of British soldiers that, I feel like we were taught about in elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This happened in 1765, but a few things have happened since then. Actually, so that happened way back in 1765. Not the coercive acts or the intolerable acts, but the passing of housing British soldiers, that happened in 1765. So they kind of go hand in hand, but in 1774 is definitely, there's a flux in this.
Okay.
But the actual official documents actually forbid quartering troops in private homes.
Oh.
But like I said, we can't.
Yeah, that's not the picture I was given in school.
Yeah, exactly.
Of what happened. Yeah.
And funny enough, I added this on here from an old citizenship study test. The question actually is, why did the colonists fight the British? And the correct answer is because the British Army stayed in their houses.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That is, when you say citizenship, you mean someone is taking that quiz to become a citizen of the United States?
And that was on their study quiz. I'm not going to say that.
Do you know how old that test was?
So the study guide, I'm not saying it's on the test.
Yes.
But the study guide, I want to say it was from early 2000s.
Really? That research?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm learning things.
And of course, fighting begins in 1775.
Mm-hmm.
And,
we know that.
We officially declare independence, and obviously 4th of July. If you want to look into that further, you may see some things about July 2nd. But 1776, America is independent, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
all that leading up to our story today. So now, to backtrack, you'll hear the lovely voice of Megan.
Okay, so I'm sorry, listeners. I got so engrossed in what Daniel was saying, I did not get to my correct parts of the notes here. Here we go. Now I'm ready. I apologize. No one. Oh no! And now I lost my notes. Hang on. My goodness, it will get better on episode 3.
Oh look, I found it. No one's really talking about independence at the time of the incident.
Is that how I sound?
I was just trying to cover, man. I was just trying to cover. I figured you'd edit it.
You put like a weird accent. Okay.
Here.
No one's really talking about independence at the time of this incident. There's, of course, plenty of unhappy colonists, but who has been glad to be taxed in the history of taxes? I mean, really, when you break it down. But from the Boston Massacre onward, or what is it, the incident on
King Street.
King Street. I want to be, for if we do ever have any international listeners, I don't feel like that's happening now, but if it does, I want to be correct.
And I do have to correct that. It says no one's really talking about independence. Like, obviously there is talk, but as a whole, the majority is not this fervent, like, everyone's like, yeah, independence. But there's certainly, like, Sons of Liberty is occurring before this incident.
Yeah.
Right? So there's certainly those who talk about it. Yes, exactly.
But it's not like a huge thing yet.
Yeah.
That's majorly discussed out in the open. But there's murmurings.
Yeah, just had to clarify that, though.
Okay,
I don't want someone going into their history class and being like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, no. That would not be good. Or us getting some comments or some corrections because we didn't say it correctly. Okay, so, of course, as I said, nobody's ever really been thrilled about being taxed. But from the Boston Massacre or the incident on King Street onward, there's a real sense that the only way to rid us of this toxin is bloodletting. Ooh, that's very dramatic. Daniel wrote this. I'm impressed. Making the necessity of this needing to be more than it was, something revolution worthy. This writing, Daniel, so impressed. Something to consider. A couple of weeks prior, loyalist Ebenezer Richardson kills Christopher Cedar. Is that how you would pronounce that?
Yeah, Cedar House rules.
Yes,
Sorry,
exactly.
I couldn't pass that
It's
up.
okay. Who was 11. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
So I know I didn't add notes to that, but
that's something.
It was pretty much this guy was a loyalist, and some guys during this time, like I said, we're still 5 years until the first shots ring out.
Yeah.
There's still a lot of animosity towards these people who are loyalists, and this guy's house, and I wish I had put notes down if I had intended to elaborate. I want to say that they were breaking into his house or doing something, but yeah, he shot in self-defense.
Okay.
And this kid ends up getting killed. So yeah, like,
not a good look.
Yeah, people
but he didn't intend to kill a child.
And the reason I put that in here is because when the incident on King Street happens, like, people are still upset about this.
Yeah.
It was not.
So there's already unrest and anger over this
Boston.
happening.
And we're going to get further into it. I put it further down in the notes, I believe, just about how, the smaller a town, the bigger an impact something has. And it's easy to get caught up in what Boston looks like today and forget that Boston then was much different than Boston today.
Yeah, it was a more tight-knit community, smaller.
Very, very much smaller.
Yeah.
Like, I have it written down further, but I want to say small, like 15,000. Actually, you know what? It's written down. We'll get into it later.
Okay.
A lot less than it has today.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. You weren't wrong. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'll carry on. What exactly happened on March 5th, 1770, when British soldiers fired their rifles and killed 5 colonists on Boston's King Street, is a matter of historical debate, which makes it perfect for this podcast. We can discuss it. The next day, British Captain Thomas Preston turned himself in to the Justice of the Peace. Throughout the month, in a trial with John Adams, John Adams, as the soldiers' defense attorney, Public depositions were held at, I should have read this ahead of time. There are some tricky words in here. How would you say that? Faneuil?
I would just say F Hall.
That doesn't sound good, though. I'm not going to say that. Faneuil Hall. And I apologize if somebody's listening and they're like, I know how to say that. That's incorrect. You're more than welcome to give me the correct pronunciation. As Bostonians attempted to piece together a coherent story of the events.
Okay, and to elaborate on that paragraph.
Yes.
I'm getting bad. Am I elaborating too much?
I don't think so. I think that's the point of a podcast, right?
I'll show you the point of a podcast.
Are you
as I elaborated on this paragraph.
Okay, that's okay.
So Captain Preston turns himself in, not because, he's a British commission officer.
Yeah.
But there's so much turmoil and everyone's so, honestly, reading up on this, it seems like it's just to shut the people up. I am so innocent of anything wrong here. I'm just going to go turn myself in so we can all shut up about it because y'all are annoying the mess out of me.
Yeah.
And then when you hear about John Adams, why would he represent these British soldiers? And his reasoning is awesome. Because at first I was like, man, I thought I knew about John Adams. Let me go see. Maybe he wasn't a patriot yet. No, he was. But this is awesome. He wanted to show the world the humanity and just the professionalism of this new America that didn't even exist yet.
Yeah.
But he wanted to show, be the beacon of reason and morality and law. And say, these guys deserve a fair trial. We can't show the world we're different or deserve to be different if we're not acting different.
Kind of like, and I hope nobody rolls their eyes at me, this very scholarly comparison, but kind of like in The Walking Dead, which we have not finished because we just couldn't do it. I don't even know what season
just like
we stopped.
that, we lost listeners.
But just, couldn't.
What are you getting at with this?
Sorry. But remember how they didn't kill Negan? He was where they drew the line and they were like, we're gonna put him in prison, and a lot of people didn't understand that because they've just been killing people willy-nilly up until this point, and this horrible person that had attacked their friends and killed some of their friends. So kind of like that, look, we're gonna set a better... Stop laughing at me. I think it's a great comparison.
For the record, I do not agree.
You don't agree it's a good comparison?
What's
but that was the idea, is
Rick Grimes
to John Adams. That's exactly what I'm doing, just to clarify. But but it was we're setting the precedent for this new civilization, is basically what he was doing. That's what I'm trying to get at. Do you still disagree?
That part of it, I can see the comparison.
Thank you. That's just what popped into my head.
I'd like to compare and contrast.
Okay, you can if you wish. Do you actually want to contrast?
Oh, no, thank you.
No, okay. Okay. Let me see. So, shall I continue?
Because, I don't want to contrast.
Okay, just checking. All right. Let me see here. Trying to read the court hearings, which was pretty difficult, but one thing that gets lost in the translation. So, you were trying to read the court hearings.
Oh, my
You didn't
gosh,
write that sentence out.
No, I don't know. It's weird. We always think about language from this time period, and they used F's instead of S's.
Yes.
Religiously.
Yes.
That's how it was.
I know.
And then there was something else, but it was difficult to read. It is
really
awesome though to have the access archives that I have.
Yeah.
And read through this stuff.
Yeah.
It was really neat, but also very painful.
Very difficult and painful. So you were trying to read the court hearings and it was very difficult. But one thing that gets lost in translation is Boston in 1770 and not 2022. So I guess this is what you were mentioning earlier. The 2020 census showed Boston was 689,326 people. That's their population?
People.
That's their population?
Yeah,
That's
bunch.
wild. Okay.
And 38 homicides for the year.
That's what I'm reading.
Up to December. So obviously there's 1 month that hadn't been counted.
December 21, yeah.
But 38 homicides for the entire year in December, which is, I'd say, pretty good for that population.
Not terrible for that massive population. I didn't realize that it was that big. I knew it was a big city, but I didn't realize it was that big. Okay.
And obviously we don't get into it for a little while, but those that died, to have that number of homicides happen throughout 12 months in a city that big.
Yeah.
And then to have these guys who we're going to get into killed in an evening a population that's so much smaller.
That definitely made a mark.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So
the population in 1770 was, I had it right, 15,520 inhabitants.
Very similar to towns around here. We live in small town Texas. We like to say anonymous, so I'm not going to say the name of our town, but we do live in a fairly small
Texas,
community.
they know where you're at now.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's such a small state. How wouldn't take them long to find us, I'm sure. But we do live kind of in a little clump of small communities, small towns. So it's kind of like around our area. Probably not as hot, though, I would imagine.
In Boston.
It's a good accent. I'm impressed. So, the population in 1717 was, 15,520 inhabitants. Now imagine, let's say, NATO forces, and I'm being lenient here, but a contingency force we don't want in town who kills 5 local civilians. I mean, that's a big deal. That's headlines in a city like Houston, but in a hub like Boston, 5 is a percentage of that population. Very small, but it's notable. So kind of picturing like that, like you said, like being in our own little community.
Yeah. And I'd written down NATO forces because I don't want to put them out. Well, I don't want to put them out like someone we're not at war with, but, we're not allies with.
Yeah.
Like, I hate to even say anybody, but
I see what you're saying.
Since everyone's upset with Russia right now, I'll just say Russia. Like, if Russian forces were here right now, obviously there'd be more of a problem than just their presence. But
that would almost be like they had taken over.
Yeah.
For it to be similar.
They turn around and murk 5
civilians. So it's already bad enough, and then they turn around.
Like, that's
I feel like even if we had, like, martial law in this area, that would be a little frustrating. Like, if our own military, that would probably be a little frustrating, especially if they were being as obnoxious as the colonists saw them being. I'm not saying they actually were, because, like I said, I feel like we were taught that much differently in history here in the U.S., that it was much worse than probably it was. But if we felt that way about them and then they killed 5 local guys, that would be very upsetting. I see that. Yeah.
There'd be some hoopla.
There's some hoopla. That's a good way to describe it, definitely. So it says right here in your notes about 2,000 to 4,000 troops in Boston at the time of the incident. So that's like a pretty large
but we have to remember they're not all at this.
They weren't all at this incident.
Correct. Yeah. Certainly not. And I think those numbers are so different. Just because obviously totally Boston isn't like a walled city where they check in and out.
Yes,
they
of course.
Could be flown in, who knows. But I've looked at...
Did you say flown in? Flowing in. Okay, I was about to say, I hated to correct you, like, while we're recording.
Well, it's not a very popular subject, but the helicopters they use during that time. But no, there's just a bunch of different official documents, unofficial, everything. There's like 7 different sources I pulled from. Yeah. And I just went with
kind of a rough estimate of
2,000 to
what
4,000.
You were seeing. Okay.
Enough.
It was enough. So there were 2 critically wounded teenagers during the incident too, Christopher Monk and John Clark. And then, I don't know, I'm a little confused with your notes. Were those 2 critically wounded teenagers who are these next people? Edward Payne, John Green?
So now we're going into the actual incident. Okay. And I put the injured first before we named.
Okay, I'm sorry. Am I reading past my part here?
Is that past your part?
I don't think so. I think you're supposed to pick up on the next section. I'm going to tell you that, okay, so I'm so sorry. I know this is very serious. We're talking about those critically wounded. One of the people that is listed is Robert Patterson. And I read Robert Pattinson. And I was like, he really is a vampire. I just had to stop. And that's who played Edward on Twilight, Daniel.
What's his name?
Robert Pattinson, I think.
Pattinson,
I'm pretty sure.
Well, how do you know he didn't just tweak his name so that people like you didn't pick up on that?
Perhaps.
That's why he was only injured.
Somebody needs to look into it because that's odd.
I mean, this did happen at night.
Ooh. Conspiracy. Are we going to be like a conspiracy podcast too?
I feel like we've already crossed that line.
Possibly. All right. So the critically wounded Christopher Monk, John Clark, Edward Payne, John Green, Robert Patterson, David Parker were also injured. but they weren't.
Okay, so those are just the injured. Now we're getting into the actual story of what took place.
What actually took place on King Street. All right, I'll let Daniel take it.
As with everything the military messes up, it starts with a private. Not always the case.
Not always the case.
It happens both ways. But yeah, this incident really kicks off with Private Hugh Wheaton. With Private Hugh White. He's guarding the king's money single-handedly. So he's out there by himself. Like, there's an armed soldier. Like, everyone, I read things people are upset about. Why was this guy alone? Blah, blah, blah. But, like, he's in a town. I know it's Boston, and by comparison, it is a big town, but 15,000, it's a town. This guy's an armed soldier. Mm-hmm. Like, nobody should be messing with him, the money, the house, like, nothing. Yeah. He should be fine. Really, especially from a British viewpoint, like, these people should be in line enough to where they shouldn't even have to guard it. But here we are. We get temptation. They're guarding it. Private White's outside guarding this thing. Okay. Edward Garrick.
I would say Garrick. Because you would pronounce like the name Garrett or Gareth with that same pronunciation. Names. Oh, okay. Excuse me.
He's a teenager at the time. He starts pestering a British officer, so not private on guard, but, you know, they're at this home. This officer may have been out smoking, swinging on like those little porch swings, or just sitting. Who knows? But he is within earshot of the street.
Okay.
So this Edward guy starts pestering this British officer about a debt. Hey, you owe me money. And I really read into this as there's no debt. Like, he did in fact pay it. That was found out later. Like, there was no debt.
So the officer owed Garrick
the kid was money. Messing with him about owning money.
But he had paid it back already.
He already paid it. Okay. I'm really reading this as, like, the town knows what's being guarded. And it's when I was like, hey, you owe me money. Like, give him, just messing with this guy. Because they're on top of the king's money.
Yeah.
But yeah, the officer did in fact not owe him money, but he's giving him a hard time about owing money.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, the private, as I said, British viewpoint, these people should be in line, and like, how dare you even speak to an officer that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, Private White finally has enough. He gets in this kid's face. They start going back and forth. By the end of it, Private White ends up putting a rifle butt across this kid's head. Like, just cracks his skull.
Like, whacks him in the head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't start none, won't be none. So the kid
he ain't playing.
Starts screaming. And I imagine getting cold clocked in the side of the head with a rifle. I can see him.
Didn't knock him out.
I can see this kid actually screaming in agony.
Yes.
But
not to be dramatic.
Given everything that's going on, I could also see the kid trying to just stir up a whole bunch of trouble.
Yeah.
And just acting like a complete fool. Either way, it works, and attention is drawn to the incident.
Okay.
Soon they're surrounded by angry Bostonians, and I love saying Bostonians for some reason.
I know, I'm with you there.
So this is going on. Captain Thomas Preston is the OIC of this entire guarding of the king's money. Okay. And he answers the call of Private White by bringing 8 soldiers out.
Possibly overkill? What do you think?
Well, see, we don't know how many Bostonians.
Oh, that's fair.
I mean, if they really wanted to, and who knows, maybe they could have. Like, this could have gone a lot different. And I really wish I could have been there, because there's a whole lot of prominent figures at this actual thing who might have said, hey, like, after those 5 guys got killed, I think there's enough people there. Because you have to remember, the rifles they have, once you fire them, you're kind of just with your bayonet and the rifle itself after that. You're
That's
not going to
just... It's not
I really do think
fire.
They could have been overran, but I also believe, and this is without research on this particular statement I'm about to make, so please don't run me. But, like, I really want... I want to look into... Did they not overrun these guys because there wasn't enough, or maybe they're just too confused, or was there enough intellect, like leadership intellects there to say, hey, leave this situation as it is. we can use this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if you murder 8 of the king's soldiers, like, you're now the bad guy.
I see.
If we have 5 guys killed by them, they're the bad guy. I.e. the Boston Massacre.
Yeah.
Right? So I really... So 8 I don't think is overkill. 8 I think... Honestly, like I said, 1 should have been enough. So 8 armed professional soldiers. Like, we got this. Like, chill out. So they go outside, right? Benjamin Frizzle. So, and here's another thing, and you see this all the time, I'm sure, with your true crime podcast and anything you watch, just the value in eyewitnesses. Benjamin Frizzle claimed to have heard a fifth shot. And yes, he is related to Miss Frizzle.
I was wondering.
This goes into, because I put a few different eyewitness testimonies. Remember, formal testimonies in court hearings. That's where I got a lot of this stuff from, was the court hearings on this.
Yeah.
But I think you see it a lot of time in your true crime podcast, and I have heard it, and tell me if this is wrong, but I've heard that sometimes, like, eyewitnesses really aren't worth, like, they're not worth the value we think they are, just because time and time again you can find that they're not actually, their stories are all over the place. Like, if you ask 2 people what happened, you might get 2 stories. If you ask 10 people what happened, you might get 9 different stories. That's something we kind of see here. But anyway, Benjamin Frizzle claimed to have heard a 5th shot was coming from a single gun. The next 2, third discharge of 3 guns, and then a volley of 5.
When you say the next 2, are you talking about, like, next people that were talked to? Or, he's, like, listing what he heard?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
so he's a witness for this trial. So he heard, 4 shots kind of in unison, a 5th shot from an individual, and then 2 together, and a third discharge of 3 guns, and then a volley of 5. So if that's coming from 8 soldiers, like, this was not just a reaction, if you will. Like, that many rounds going off from these types of rifles, they were there for a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Jeremiah Allen claims to have heard 4 or 5 rifles fired, then another set of 2 or 3.
Yeah.
George Cofter testified that he heard a command to fire.
Oh.
And this is where we get into the validity of witnesses. Yeah. Because from what we're hearing, whether you believe Benjamin, whether you believe Jeremiah, or any of these other people, I said that earlier, these were professional soldiers. And when a command to fire is given, like, that's in unison. That's together, fired in volleys, all together, all at once. You're not hearing, like, a few here, a few there.
Yeah.
So I'm really not buying into that last testimony of George Coffer that there was a command to fire.
Well, and it's also just interesting that he's the only one of, how many was that?
3? Oh, we only included 3 witnesses.
Okay. It's just weird that no one else that you included said they heard the command to fire.
Yeah.
They were talking about different, like, kind of chunks of gunfire.
Yeah. And but either way, however it plays out, whether it's command or not, Private U. Montgomery, again the private, fired the first shot. That's not up for debate.
He was the one that was guarding.
That's a different private.
Different private. Okay, yeah. I thought his name was Hugh too. There was another Hugh.
That was
Hugh
White.
White. Oh wow, how funny. Okay, so Hugh White was the private that was guarding.
Mm-hmm.
This was a different private
altogether.
Hugh
Montgomery.
Okay, man, he must have been a really popular name.
Megan of the guy names.
It's the Megan of the guy names at that time. Yeah.
Okay, so whether it's unified shots, whether it's 5 shots, however this occurs, at the end of it, there's 5 American dead lying in the streets. First one is Mr. Samuel Gray. He was shot in the head, had the hole of the size of a fist through it.
So that was probably close range. right?
Yes.
I mean, I know these were old-fashioned, like, musket
Well, and that was
type.
another thing that was brought up in the testimony. And so Captain Preston never claimed to have given orders of fire. And in what I read, it never shows any of these soldiers saying that they were commanded to fire. Yeah. But across the board, on both sides, there is testimony that there was men with clubs. Some people were grabbing the British soldiers' rifles. So, in all intents and purpose, like, there is certainly a case in self-defense.
For the British soldiers.
Correct. I mean, when you have a guy who has your weapon, I mean, that's your protection, but also has a club that can crack your skull open.
I mean, I could understand that. Yeah. If they're trying to grab your gun away from you and they've got a club in their hand. Yeah. I think that is not a shocking reaction.
But at the end of it, 5 dead. Samuel Gray was shot in the head. Mm-hmm. This I found interesting. And this man was a former slave. I had to do a bit more research on that.
Really?
But in the court hearings, it only labeled him as a mulatto. But he was shot in the chest 2 times, and this is Sypharis Atticus. How do you pronounce that? That's some of the names, man. Atticus. He was the only one, and it frustrated me. He was the only one without a Mister in front of it when they list these people.
That makes me sad. You can see, like, I know why, but I hate it still.
Yeah, him, and then there's a teenager who didn't have a Mister, but the adults.
Yeah, adult man who should have. Yeah.
James Caldwell was shot in the back twice. 15-year-old Samuel Maverick, he died the next day, and then Patrick Carr ends up dying of his wounds on the 14th.
And then we have the wounded that we listed earlier.
Correct. So on trial, they claimed self-defense and found not guilty of murder. All of them. Nobody was...
This was the British soldiers.
Correct. Okay. The captain, all the way down to the privates, no one's found guilty of murder. The only ones found guilty of a crime were Hugh Montgomery, and I hate to say found guilty of a crime because what I did not research, although I imagine there wasn't any, I didn't research to see, because it still happens today. You can be tried in civil court, but also military court. So I did not do the research. It just hit me to do it, to see if they were tried like in British military court.
Yeah.
But in this court hearing here in the colonies, none of them found guilty of murder. Hugh Montgomery and Matthew Kilroy were found guilty of manslaughter and were branded on the thumbs as first offenders per English law. Because although this happened in the colonies, still
they
a
were
British
still
colony.
Under English law. Yeah.
So that's what they got, a little brand on the thumb. So a little different than today's punishments for manslaughter, from what I understand.
Right.
But that's what they got.
I don't know what's worse, though. I mean, obviously, prison is not a good place. I would not want to go, but can you imagine being marked for the rest of your life as a killer? And I imagine whatever they were branded with, it was, you think you would go with the brand?
I'd wear gloves a lot.
You just wear gloves a lot? I don't know. When I guess in this era they could have, it wouldn't have been that, odd for them to have had on gloves. So I hear you. Yeah. But I don't know. I just think that would be a terrible thing for the rest of your life.
I thought that too. I was like, that's nothing. But yeah, you're marked for the rest of your life. And then it just goes back in that adage, like, what if they weren't guilty?
Yeah,
also how do you get a brand on top of that or around? Like, is there some sort of...
It's like a little X or something. A little... What do they call that when it's like the circle with a line through it? That means no. I'm sure there's a name for it.
I just call it a don't do that
circle. A don't do that symbol.
But
if they had one of that put over it, like, how do you reverse
that? But then, so I thought that, right?
Yeah.
But then why wouldn't I just go out and get that brand?
That's also true.
Brand myself with the don't do that circle.
With the don't do that circle, so that they, I know no circle, so that they know not to, that's not, I don't know, man. Wow.
Yeah. So, a lot different pace and just a change of gears this week.
Kind of a palate cleanser, because I know our first episode was so heavy. Not that this isn't heavy, I feel like it's really easy with these really historical cases to not see these people as human. But I mean, a lot of people died that day. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a tragedy. I mean, it's just what truly happened, in this situation. So this is still a very, very sad case, but without quite so much graphic violence because, though I don't know, that hole in the head was pretty clear mental image.
And I don't know if that came up in court, if that happened from a bullet wound.
Oh, like you mean maybe, because that's something I'm wondering is like, if these people got all worked up, obviously in our modern times, we've seen that, mobs and crowds and riots happening. And if these people got all worked up, these Bostonians, these colonists, like, isn't it possible that some of them, I'm not saying this did happen, but it was such a kerfuffle. I know that's a very comical word to describe what it is, but like, isn't it possible that they might have hurt each other? I mean, I'm sure the British officers, obviously they fired shots.
Well, I meant telekinesis.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. What if that's how it happened? But then you got real with it.
So,
but no,
sorry.
I mean, I want to believe, which who knows, maybe it was said, and all we have are trial records from over 200 years ago. Mm-hmm. But yeah, what if there were British soldiers like, hey, a shot rang out that wasn't ours. That's when we opened up. But there's no evidence of that. Certainly there's no evidence of that. But I mean, it's possible. They were really upset.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm just imagining if this were to happen in modern day with all the circumstances that we've put around it. Like if, like I said, if it was a military, martial law, and we were not happy about it in our little community, and then, this incident where he hit this, was a teenager, correct? Though I know teenagers were viewed differently back then. But he hit this young man in the head, and he started screaming and creating a scene. And then the locals' reaction to it, like, I could see it becoming that much of a riot that maybe people were hurt, that were, like, they were hurting each other. Like I said, I know the British soldiers also fired their guns, and they were a part of it, but I don't know. I guess that's why there's such a shroud of mystery around it, because even the people that were there don't seem to be totally... aware of what happened.
We talk about the value of witness testimonies. Mm-hmm. Something that came from everybody, no one denied its occurrence, was that outcry for British soldiers to shoot them.
Really?
From the Bostonians.
Really?
They were like just taunting, and I've seen that in more recent times too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But like it really, I think, plays into that kind of theory I had, and again, based on nothing. I need to research that, but
it's a theory.
I could really I mean, they could have murked that private who was outside. How easy would that have been to kill him? He's out there by himself.
Well, yeah.
But I think there really was an agenda there, like, hey, let's create as big a scene as we can. Mm-hmm. So we can put this on the headlines, because that's when you really see a big push to independence. Mm-hmm. That this was a tool, whether it was orchestrated or not, and I'm not even trying to debate that right now. But whether it's orchestrated or not, it was certainly used as a major tool in the drive to American independence.
And I think that that's a fair thing to say. And I can totally see that. And what's funny is, and that's what I love about doing this podcast with you, is that you are truly a scholar of history. And I love history, but obviously I haven't read all that you've read into it. And, just the way that we're taught things in school here. And I know every country kind of glosses over things and tells history from their own perspective. So I know that's what happened, growing up and hearing this story. It is not presented at all in that way, but, as an adult looking at it politically, I can definitely see how, because, you have to remember this time period, there were lots of people living in the colonies who were colonists, who were still very loyal to Britain and to King George. And, I can see how they were trying to kind of turn the tide, possibly. There needed to be something that would start driving people who were colonists who maybe didn't wholly agree with being independent yet.
Well, I hate to even say this.
Oh, boy.
It drives me nuts, because I hate to put... It's kind of like... I hate to put information out there that I'm not absolutely certain about.
Yeah.
I'm certain about the numbers I'm going to say. I just don't remember what year that information was gathered. But it was certainly later on in the scheme of things where we are told or were told everyone was on board.
Yeah.
But, even though America was so much different back then, it was still diverse in what people did for a living, how they made a living, just so many different things. But I cannot remember if it was 1770 or 1774, but somewhere in there. And as we look at all this, that's not that great of a window.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the colonists were divided. I want to say it was like 46 against 54, like, for breaking away or not, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They were still very much, it wasn't all, like, loyalists. There was a lot more of them than, and whether they were loyalists or not, I think there was certainly a lot more people not ready to just break away.
Well, and that was a really big deal. I think that, I think that should be, I mean, again, I feel like we get really caught up in, like, I'm picturing, like, that cartoon, Liberty's Kids. Is that what it was called? Do you remember that? It was about, like, this era. It was a cartoon. It's really great. I remember watching it during social studies time sometimes. It's,
Hold on. A cartoon, like a animated cartoon?
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking like a Sunday newspaper thing.
No, it was like a...
Liberty's Kids?
Liberty's Kids. I think they played it on PBS, too, at some point.
How dare you? You look me in the face and ask me. So Megan knows that I grew up with 3 channels, 4, 6, and 12, and there's a whole lot of things she references, and I'm like, I don't know anything about that.
He didn't even have PBS. He didn't even have public broadcasting. It makes me so sad because, you missed out on Wishbone and...
Liberty's Kids.
Yeah, or Liberty Kids. It was just set in that time period of the American Revolution, and it was, like, following children at that time period. But even, like, in the way things are presented on that, and just, like I said, history we're taught in school and everything, you just forget that... Or not aware. Like, you have to think about, like, I can imagine being at that time period and even if I wasn't a loyalist, like, not really wanting to go to war.
Oh, yeah, because you're risking some, like, exactly. Outside of your life,
Like, the uncertainty, like, what is it going to be like if we win? Like, what will this country really be? Yeah. I mean, I could totally see not wanting to go to war, even if I wasn't 100% loyal to... the king and to staying a part of England, like just the idea of the unknown. I don't like the unknown. I don't think I would have been really 100% on board. And of course, I would have not wanted you to go off to war, and I know you would have.
Well, I think most of what those, like those numbers were coming from earlier, that really didn't play into the description of that information. It was more of, I think, I am stable financially.
Yeah.
With the way things are.
And that's kind of what I mean, too. Yeah, like, as an adult person, like, I realize that's a big deal. Like, it's very unsure. All of it is very unsure and uncertain. Yeah. So, like, your whole life could be turned upside down.
Was Edward Garrick a character on Liberty's Kids?
No. I can't remember any of their names. It was a good one, though. It was a good little TV show. You know what was a really good... like, as a kid, actually did kind of sort of introduce me to the idea that, like, not everybody was wanting, independence, was American Girl. Remember, I loved Felicity, the American Girl, and I remember in that, like, her, they were not loyalists, but there were people close to their family who were. And he's looking at me again like, I'm going to stop bringing things up, because you laughed at me about...
American Girl dolls?
Like, no, there's the books that go with them.
With the dolls?
You did not know this? Your sister also had American Girl dolls, I thought.
They came with a book.
Well, they didn't come... Actually, I think they did come with the first book. But there is, like, a series of books to go with each doll.
So, okay, this is all I'm asking.
Okay.
Is you buy a doll and it comes with the book?
It comes with the first book in the series about that girl, about that character. Oh. So I very much love Felicity, fellow redhead.
So there's more books on her.
Yes, and it came with a Meet Felicity book, and it was about this time period of history. I really wasn't into the Revolutionary War at 9 years old, but I became interested because she was redheaded, and I wanted it all that was redheaded because they were very rare, and so I was very excited to have that.
You chose to be a loyalist based on hair color.
No, she wasn't a loyalist though. She knew loyalist. So in the book, like her family wasn't, but like some of their very close friends were, and it was like a problem. It's a debate to be had. I feel like we went way down too much of a rabbit hole. I apologize. I feel like I'm the source of the rabbit holes, and I'm sorry.
You're a rabbit hole digger.
I am a worry hole digger. Sorry, inside joke. But yeah, a rabbit hole digger. Sorry, that's who I am. Chase squirrels.
Yeah, well, next week we'll be going into something that kind of meets in the middle of these two as far as, I guess...
historically.
Yeah, time.
Yeah.
But we look forward to having you back. This has been Grave Breaches with your co-ed hosts...
Megan.
And Daniel.